What's this? A letter for me.
Welcome to another episode of Remember the Great Sports Through the Mail Thursdays. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I thought being it's Thanksgiving, what else but to do some football returns in the mail. Usually people are eating their turkey this time of day, sitting down and watching some football. So I thought I'd share some football returns with you this week. So we're going to jump into this because I'm really excited to share a couple of these with you, because two of them are some of the greatest that you've ever seen, and this other guy was pretty good himself when he played in college football. The first return is from former wide receiver of the Buccaneers, John or J.K. McKay, and commonly during his playing days he went by J.K. McKay because his father was also John McKay, so he's technically John McKay Jr., but he went by J.K. instead. So let me tell you about J.K. McKay and his career in football. John McKay played college football at famed USC, where he played on the 1972 and 1974 national championship teams and caught, among many others, a 38-yard touchdown pass from longtime team and friend Pat Hayden in the fourth quarter of the 1975 Rose Bowl game. He, along with teammate Pat Hayden, were named the co-MVP of that game. After his time at USC, he was drafted by the Cleveland Browns in the 16th round of the 1975 draft. But instead of signing with the Browns, he opted to sign instead for the Southern California Sun of the World Football League due to a dislike for the Cleveland area. It's not real big fan of Cleveland, I guess. After the WFL ceased operations midway through the 1975 season, the Browns made him available in the 1976 expansion draft because they owned the rights to him, where he was selected by the expansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In Tampa Bay, McKay started at receiver for 3 seasons for the Buccaneers. He played for his father, John McKay, at Tampa Bay. This is, a coincidence that this was actually a father and son combo. The father was the head coach and the son was on the team. During his time with Tampa Bay, McKay was considered a reliable pass catcher who opposing defenses considered a legitimate threat. He was forced to retire due to complications from broken hand and just played a couple 3 seasons in the NFL. Overall, in his career, he just had 2 touchdown passes with 41 receptions for 632 yards in those 3 seasons in the NFL. After retiring from professional football, McKay went back to college and attended Stetson University College of Law. After graduating with his law degree, he became a trial attorney in the Tampa Bay area. In 1986, he moved across country and moved to Los Angeles and became a partner at a law firm in Los Angeles. By 2001, he took a position as the general manager of the Los Angeles Extreme of the XFL. The XFL, as you know, did not last long, and as the general manager of the Extreme, they were the one and only champions of the XFL, being that one season that Los Angeles won. By 2010, McKay became a senior associate athletic director at his alma mater at USC under the direction of, guess what, his former teammate Pat Hayden. So I'm not sure if he's still working at USC, but had a kind of unique career for sure. But obviously he did not play in the NFL as long as he probably had hoped to, just those 3 seasons. But he went back to law school and went on to become an attorney, and I'm guessing that he probably made a pretty hefty sum of money being an attorney, more than he ever did playing in the NFL in the 1970s. So thank you, Mr. McKay. We'll move on to the next return. All right, if anybody who is a Cincinnati Bengals fan, you're going to appreciate this one. This is a return from all-pro quarterback Ken Anderson, I should say, on 4 of 4. Here's the card with him and Joe Theismann. I'm hoping that maybe I can send that to Joe Theismann. I think Joe requires a little bit of a small donation to sign now. He used to sign for free, but I think it's very affordable, like $5. So hopefully I'll send that off to Theismann and ask him to sign as well. So let me tell you about Ken Anderson and his career in football. Ken Anderson grew up in Batavia, Illinois, which is near the Chicago area. And the ironic thing is he was neighbors with future Hall of Fame basketball player Dan Issel. So Anderson and Issel used to run in the same circles, living in the same neighborhood, and they became, friends then and stayed friends throughout their lives. Also, a neat thing to note is he also was friends with the late Craig Sager, the announcer, the longtime NBA analyst for, the NBA that passed away a few years ago. After graduating from college in little-known Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois, Anderson was selected 67th overall in the 1971 NFL Draft by the Bengals, where he would soon become noted for a short league pass and running type of quarterback. Anderson made 4 starts in that 1971 season while playing in 7 other games, in a year where the Bengals fell off from production from previous seasons. He rushed for 125 yards on 22 total carries for 1 touchdown while being sacked 23 times that season. However, Anderson the next year in 1972 was given a little more reign, going 7-6 as a starter with 1,918 yards for 7 touchdowns and interceptions, 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, while having a 56.8 completion percentage. With 22 carries, he also rushed for 94 yards and had 3 touchdowns. The 1973 season proved better as Anderson went 10-4 as a starter and threw for 2,428 yards that season. The Bengals made that playoffs that year and faced the defending champion Miami Dolphins that year. In 1974, Anderson threw for a league high in completions percentage, yards, and passer rating at 95.7 while going for 18 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, but the Bengals' record dipped back down to 7-6 in his 13 starts. In 1975, Anderson threw for a league high 3,169 yards with 21 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. This would be his first Pro Bowl in his career, and he led the Bengals to a 10-3 record that season. Under future San Francisco 49ers coach Bill Walsh was the quarterback's coach under Anderson, and the Bengals won the AFC Central for the second time in 3 seasons, but they were tasked to play against the Oakland Raiders. They wound up losing that game, and this was the last season that Paul Brown would be the coach of the Bengals, and he was replaced by Bill Tiger Johnson to replace him. This is also important because with Paul Brown stepping away, this was when Bill Walsh also left the Bengals, and we all kind of know the history there. He left to go to the Chargers, and soon after the 49ers, who he would lead the 49ers to the Super Bowl. In 1976, Anderson's Bengals won 9 of their first 11 games, but the wheels fell off shortly after, with them losing to 2 of their next 3, which included 2 losses to the Steelers, for which the division rival slipped by the spot due to the tiebreakers while the Bengals stayed at home. Despite this, Anderson had a Pro Bowl caliber year again, throwing for 2,367 yards and 19 touchdowns, leading the team to a 10-4 record. Anderson and the Bengals regressed in 1977, and he went to just 7-6 as a starter, throwing for 2,145 yards. In 1977, the Bengals did not make the playoffs. In 1978, Anderson broke a bone in his right hand and did not play the first 4 games of the season. The Bengals lost all 4 of those games, and Johnson, their head coach, quit after the 0-5 start. Anderson came back, and the team went 4-8 the rest of that season, and they did not make the playoffs that year either. In 1979, the team regressed even farther back, dipping down to just a 4-win, 11-loss season with Anderson at the helm. In 1980, with 1,770 yards passing, which is the least he threw in his entire career, he had just 6 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Going into that 81 season, he actually was benched as the starter, and this was the motivator that Ken needed, because when he won his starting role back, The Bengals went 12-4 throughout that season after the slow start. They became the AFC Central #1 seed, and they faced the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. This was their first postseason win, and thus were slated to host the AFC Championship game, facing off against the Chargers. The team held back the Chargers and wound up winning the game 27-7. And this would face them off against, ding, 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 Bill Walsh and the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl. Now, the 49ers had this quarterback named Joe Montana, and it was a very good game. The Bengals actually were within striking distance at 23-14. And when it was said and done, the 49ers hung on to that win, winning 26-21, winning their Super Bowl title. And the Bengals were just oh so close. In the strike-shortened 1982 season, Anderson led the Bengals to a 7-2 record. Good for the third overall in the AFC, that record was. However, they were upset by the New York Jets at home in that season, so their season was over after going to the Super Bowl the previous year. 1983, the Bengals started out going 2-6 in the first half, finishing 7-9 overall. This was Forrest Gregg's last season as the coach. Anderson played in 13 of the games and went 5-8 with that record. And at this point, we were getting towards the end of his career. In 1984, this was the last season that Anderson was the primary quarterback, because in 1985 they brought this young Boomer Esiason guy on board, and he kind of took over as the main quarterback for the Bengals for many years after that. If you're a Boomer fan, you know what I'm talking about. After the 86 season, Anderson retired. He would go on to other ventures other than being a player. When it was all said and done, have 16 NFL seasons under his belt, completed 2,654 out of 4,475 passes for a 59% completion rate, 32,000 yards passing, 197 touchdowns. His 2,220 rushing yards are the most ever by a Bengals quarterback. He got into coaching. Surprise, surprise, he coached with the Cincinnati Bengals in different, quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterbacks coach. After his time at the Bengals, he went and spent some time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And believe it or not, he went and coached for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the rival Pittsburgh Steelers, from 2007 to 2009. So after a long career as a player going through the mid-'80s, he basically coached through the 2009 season. He's obviously in the Augustana College Hall of Fame. He's in the Ring of Honor, obviously, with the Bengals when they did their Ring of Honor class. This is one of those guys that's been argued many, many times to be a NFL Hall of Famer, because some of his stats actually are a little better than some quarterbacks that are in the Hall of Fame. The only big glaring difference is he doesn't have that Super Bowl ring. And I think, no doubt, if the Cincinnati Bengals would have won that Super Bowl, this guy would be in the Hall of Fame. But that 26-21 loss to the 49ers, thank you very much, Mr. Anderson, and we'll move on to the final return. All right, so this next return is from former Heisman Trophy winner Mike Rozier on a Topps All-American card, along with a card of him as a pro, and also a card of him as a Nebraska Cornhusker, but he was a pro at that point during that year, but that's kind of like a flashback card. So we got 3 of 3 in return. I might have included a fourth one, but it wasn't that important to me, so just happy to get 3 of the 4 back. I must have sent one that Mike wanted to keep, which is totally fine. So let me tell you about Mike Rozier and his career in football. Mike Rozier, a New Jersey native, attended high school in Camden, New Jersey. Rozier went largely unnoticed by most of the major college programs. His recruitment to Nebraska was a complete accident. Former Nebraska head coach Frank Solich, at the time an assistant to head coach Tom Osborne, had been a keen observer of high school game films. While watching film of a game against Woodrow Wilson High School where Rozier appeared, one player on the opposing team stuck out. Well, The assistant coach looked him up, and Rozier was playing in nearby Kansas, which is not too far from Nebraska, and he was able to get his grades up to get into Nebraska. While he was at Coffeyville Junior College, he led the team to a 9-0 record in 1980, rushing for 1,157 yards. Well, due to him being a freshman at the other junior college as a sophomore in 1981, Rozier first dazzled Husker fans with a 93-yard touchdown run against Kansas State. As the season progressed, Rozier began challenging Roger Craig for the starting position, which Roger Craig was a heck of a running back, a job he would eventually win in the fall of 1982 prior to his junior year. Rozier's progress was so pronounced that the talented and established Craig moved fullback. So imagine having Rozier and Craig in your backfield. During his junior season, Rozier broke Bobby Reynolds' long-standing school record for rushing yards in a single season with 1,689 and led Nebraska to a second consecutive outright Big 8 title and a 12-home run record, but losing to the eventual controversial Penn State Nittany Lions in the national championship. As a junior, Rozier finished his 1982 season as a consensus All-American and finished 10th in the Heisman voting. As a senior, Nebraska's high-octane offense was often unstoppable, averaging 52 points a game and 401 yards rushing as a team. Rozier's statistics were mind-boggling, a nation's best 2,486 yards with 2,148 of those on the ground and 29 touchdowns. His 7.8 yards per carry mark on the season stands as the third highest mark for players with more than 214 carries in a season. Against Kansas his senior year, Rozier rushed for a staggering 230 yards in the first half and finished with 285 rushing yards total that game to set an all-time school record. Rozier went over 200 yards in each of his last 4 single-season games in 1983. His magical season was capped when he was awarded the Heisman Trophy that year. However, his senior season would end in disappointment in that controversial 1984 Orange Bowl game when the Miami Hurricanes defeated Nebraska 31-30 in the national championship. Despite that, Rozier had 138 yards on 21 carries by halftime, and he would finish the game with 147 yards after he suffered an ankle injury in that third quarter. Turning pro, Rozier was selected by the Pittsburgh Maulers first in the 1984 USFL draft. He played his first 2 pro seasons in the USFL in 1984 with the Maulers and then the following year with the Jacksonville Bulls. He was drafted in the 1984 NFL supplemental draft by the Houston Oilers once the USFL and the CFL folded. His first year in 1985 at the Oilers, he rushed for 462 yards in 14 games. 1986 appeared in 13 games for 662 yards rushing. 1987 he would appear in 11 games, and in 1988 he would have a breakout season where he rushed for over 1,000 yards for the Oilers that year. In 1987 and in that 88 season where he rushed for the most yards in his career, he would make the Pro Bowl. In 1989, however, some injuries would limit him to just 12 games and 301 yards rushing. And by the 1990 season, he was limited due to some injuries and only played for 3 games for the Oilers before he was traded to the Atlanta Falcons, where he finished the year with 153 carries overall. His final season in the NFL came the next year with the Falcons. He completed the 1991 season with 361 yards on 96 carries, and then announced, due to some injuries, he was going to retire. As a pro, Rozier finished his career with a total of 1,159 carries for 4,462 yards, having averaged 3.8 yards per carry and scoring 30 touchdowns. So the Heisman Trophy winner had some injuries that really kind of precluded him in his pro career. He would go on to have a decent pro career, but nothing like what he did while he was at Nebraska. And kind of a neat way to wrap this video up is the Rozier family actually appeared on Family Feud in 2018. So Mike, along with his wife and 3 other family members, appeared on the Family Feud. So I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. I want to thank you for joining me for this episode, and hopefully we will get a couple more autographs. I hope to get Joe Theismann maybe to sign that card for me, and I'll do an episode on him. But I want to thank J.K. McKay, or John McKay Jr., for signing my cards. I want to thank Mr. Mike Rozier for signing, and I especially want to thank Mr. Ken Anderson for signing my cards as well. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this episode. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and everybody, happy collecting.